The Umbrella Academy Review. This is a Netflix original series consisting of 10 episodes. This is just the initial season. It is based on a comic series. You might be familiar with it, most likely not. I think it's fairly obscure. Anyways, 10 episodes, roughly 60 minutes each. It is a concise season that has a primary goal. Each episode builds towards this overall mystery, and you do get a sense of resolution towards the end, which might actually surprise you. So I'm not familiar with the comic. I did a little bit of research afterwards, just so I could kind of get an idea of it. There should be some surprises and changes for you that are familiar with it. And for anyone else, this is actually a really interesting series. So it is a superhero type experience. One day back, long time ago, all these women were randomly pregnant, and these kids just came out of nowhere, basically. Seriously, it just happened. All these kids were just born one day. This billionaire went around, picked up a bunch of the kids, and basically created a superhero team. He didn't really give them names. They were given numbers, number 1, 2, 3, so forth. And they were trained together. This is a part of the series. It does the really typical Netflix sort of flashback thing, but it's not really flashbacks because you get to really see the moments sort of played out in the time they were in. And that makes sense because there is a lot of actual time travel in this show. I won't go into specifics too much, but you do get to see the future, the past, and the present. And they play around with it quite a bit because there's an extension to the actual characters aside from the main crew, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So yes, we've got this crew. You get to see them sort of when they're young and they're, just getting started. And then you also get to see them in the present time, which is basically a bunch of, emotionally stunted adults that are having problems. Their father passes away, the billionaire. Again, this is not spoiling anything. This is just the initial setup so you can get an idea of where everything's at once this starts. So everyone comes back together because the father has died. They meet up for the funeral. Obviously, they got a lot of problems. They don't really get along too well. And this series is kind of them dealing with that. And then another looming sort of apocalyptic threat as one of the siblings comes back from some other crazy place out of nowhere. And they kind of have to understand, what happened, why is this happening, and what's going on. And it sort of just explores this concept of trying to perhaps change the future while dealing with the past and also all the crazy things going on in the present. So aside from the main group of people, which were actually really well done, Ellen Page is the lead, a bit of a violinist, basically, and one without powers, so she's always been the left out one. And the series kind of it focuses around her, basically, and her character perspective with all these superhero siblings. They've got a very strong guy, someone's good at knives, 5 can basically kind of teleport, if that makes sense, little, teleportation things. One of them can manipulate with voice. There's another one that can, talk to the dead. Again, it's a very weird show. It's a very wacky one. It's going to be something that you're not able to really predict coming in. You'll be like, what is going on? They also have, a sort of ape. I don't know if he's really like a father figure, but butler kind of, like Alfred sort of to a degree, I guess you could say. And their mother is a robot android lady, and there's time traveling hitmen that are kind of in the time too, and they get mixed up with the group in certain altercations. And there's some extra side characters that I won't really mention because they are very heavily plot focused in terms of how they actually affect what's going on in the main timeline, which is interesting because there are kind of diverging timelines, but I don't know. You gotta go along with it, and the time stuff actually does get really explained well. You get the idea of what's going on, the gist of it, predetermination and fighting that and changing things. And it does make a lot of sense when you actually get in there and watch. So being hero focused, you do actually get to see a lot of the action. The CGI was really well done. The effects looked great. Very high quality for Netflix. I was pleasantly surprised about that. Some of the powers are really wacky, so they go all in at that. Because I mean, the cast sounds like a bunch of really strange individuals, right? Just in terms of like their powers. But no, they lean right into it and they don't hold anything back, which is great because it's just a funky, weird show about people dealing with their issues. And also lots of action. There's really some intense action going on in this one. Huge gunfights, action scenes, fight scenes, all kinds of things going on in this. So each episode builds towards, the finale and everything like that. It is one overall arc. But the side episodes, they split off. They're still about this overall thing, but they explore the relationships between the various members. I thought they were, well, the show was at its best when the ensemble was actually together because you get to see so many people interacting, and they all have different problems and different ways of doing things, and I thought that was really well done. But, each of the side ones kind of explores the character and gives more context into their backstory and how they fit into the group, but also it is pushing forward the main story, which is great because you don't want things to slow down because you're focusing on one guy. So you actually do get a really good look at each of the members and their powers and their abilities throughout. You actually get an episode focused on, the tough guy, what he's been doing, or the violinist, or, stuff like that. While also seeing what other characters are doing, it mixes in quite well. I think one of the standouts was definitely the number 5, the time traveling character. He was spectacular, really cool, intense action scenes. But I also thought they did some really good stuff with some of the other characters. They had a lot of focus, and you got to see a lot of where they're coming from with some of their beliefs and how they tackle things, and their, the characters around them. Because everyone else has like supporting characters for themselves too, right? I mean, they've been off doing their own little thing. So when they come together, they still have other prior relationships to deal with and other problems going on as well. And I mean, they're not really too into the funeral either, just because, they weren't given the most loving of a father, basically because he gave them numbers and the way he trained them wasn't exactly friendly, as to say. So you do get to see basically a lot of context in the background and the backstory as to why the characters act like they do throughout. I thought the general mystery was well done. They gave you sort of an event fairly early on of what could happen, and then you get the context behind how and why, and the events and how they line up were actually really well done and very interesting. I thought it was well done mystery in that regard, and it kind of kept me interested throughout because I was like, I wonder how this is going to go. And I was actually kind of surprised by the end of it too. I didn't expect it to really hit that particular point, so that was interesting for sure. So anyways, going back to the general characters, seeing them interact was great, the different powers, and then also the pacing. Because at one point they'd be going in a certain direction, and then the timelines would kind of like almost entirely shift, or they'd be sent off in a wildly different direction, and you weren't ever sure what was going to happen or where people would actually end up when things were going on. Each episode is a little bit of a surprise, and you get to see the mystery build out and then actually have a bit of a conclusive point towards the ending of it, which was well done. And yet at the same time, there's the potential to see this perhaps grow out in new ways as they sort of even tease more in the backstory and more generally in time as to where things could go in a direction, which was very interesting. Again, not spoiling anything, just giving context, because there is a lot of the time travel and just the mystery building into this sort of time state that is going on throughout. It sounds pretty crazy, right? You get a good look at the characters dealing with their problems throughout. You get some resolution and actual good character growth as they deal with each other and the threats around them, because obviously, with the element of time, there's something else going on behind the scenes with the hitmen, and you also get their perspective too. They are just as much main characters as the core family is, and it's interesting to see them thrown into the equation. And generally it was really well done. I quite enjoyed it. It was something different. It was rather easy to binge, I thought. Definitely something unique, and it takes the superhero genre in a gritty way. Everything is really grounded in realism. despite there being some rather interesting powers at play. I thought everything was somewhat realistic in the sense that, death is something that is present. They're not invincible, they're not gods, they're regular people that just have a particular buff to them that makes them a little bit better than a regular person. And that sort of just gives them the sense of being heroes to a degree based on what their father kind of prepared them for. So it's really a bunch of kids in one angle for small bits or small amounts of the time, and then most of the time it is the adult cast and their problems and seeing where these issues stem from and their conclusions and how they use that to kind of build forward and do something better as they try to work together while still having lots of issues, because they clash all the time and they don't really get along. I'd give it an 8.5 out of 10. You can read my full review in the description below. If you have any questions, let me know. But yeah, genuinely enjoyed it. Something really different, something really new. And I think they could maybe take this concept further. Really interesting Netflix original series.